Hello. This is the Bible in fewer words. We are Carol and Steve Wells. This is episode 20, Genesis chapters 39 through 41. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Carol.
Do we want to remind people that if they haven't listened to episode 19, they should?
Yeah, that's chapter 38. It's a very interesting chapter, and you really don't want to miss it. Okay, but now we've got to get back to Joseph. So this starts in chapter 39, verse 1. When the Ishmaelites arrived in Egypt, Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, bought Joseph from them.
Can I ask, where was Joseph before?
Oh, yeah. Well, a couple episodes ago, Joseph and his brothers were having troubles.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't get along so well, so they decided to get rid of him. So they threw him in a pit, and along came some Ishmaelites, very conveniently.
Yes.
And they sold him to the Ishmaelites, and now they've arrived in Egypt. Potiphar bought him from the Ishmaelites.
All right.
So verses 3 and 4. Potiphar saw that God was with Joseph. So he made Joseph an overseer of his house.
Or how does a person see that God is with someone?
It was always obvious, I think, with Joseph that God was with him from the very beginning, and everywhere he went and everyone he ever met would say, God's with that guy. There's something about him.
And actually,
something about Joseph.
His parents, too.
His parents, his family, I mean, and Joseph definitely thought there was something special about him. He thought that, that God was with him.
Yes, he was kind of a show-off.
He was, yeah. So I think it was kind of clear to everybody that God was with him.
I'm thinking back to Esau and how when he was born, he was hairy and red all over. And that was not a God is with him type character.
God, as we'll see throughout the Bible, God seems to really like the good-looking people. And I guess being red and hairy all over
doesn't qualify.
Didn't qualify. And so I don't know. Maybe that's why God hated him. He hated him. There was no other reason given, really.
No, that's weird. Okay, back to Joseph.
Okay, verse 5. And God blessed Potiphar's house for Joseph's sake. Joseph was good-looking.
Oh my God, it actually says that in verse 6.
It does. It's a little bit not as straightforward, but that's what the verse is saying.
Okay. When Potiphar's wife saw Joseph, she said, "Have sex with me." But Joseph refused. One day when Joseph went into the house, when there was no one else around, she grabbed his clothing saying, "Have sex with me." Again, she's sounding kind of desperate, isn't she?
Yeah.
I guess his magnetism and beauty just was irresistible.
She couldn't control herself.
Okay.
It's Joseph.
But Joseph left his clothes in her hand and ran away. Man, he really...
Yeah, that's strange. Usually you'd run away and maybe some of your clothes you might tear a sleeve or something. But it sounds like he just ran away naked. She had all of his clothes in her hand somehow.
Okay. Potiphar's wife told her husband, "Joseph tried to have sex with me, but I screamed, and so he left his clothes with me and ran away."
Yeah. So now Joseph is in trouble, I guess.
I guess so.
Okay, so verse 19. When Potiphar heard his wife's accusation, he threw Joseph into prison. But God was with Joseph, so the prison keeper made Joseph the master of all the prisoners.
Again, somebody else sees that God is with him.
Yeah, right.
Prison master. That is bizarre. You don't think you would put one prisoner in charge of other prisoners?
No.
Okay. So this is chapter 40. The king's butler and baker were thrown into prison, and Joseph was put in charge of them. They each had a dream on the same night. I'm wondering now why they were in prison.
Yeah, all it says is that they somehow offended the Pharaoh. It doesn't say what they did.
It could be that the shoes weren't shined right, or the baker, wrecked his little meal.
He didn't like his salad, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Or cake. Maybe he didn't like, a baker.
Oh, yeah, baker, yeah, maybe
Yeah,
cake.
okay. So they're having dreams now, I guess. Joseph asked them, "Why do you look so sad?" And they answered, "Because no one can interpret our dreams."
Yeah, people in the Bible like to have their dreams interpreted, and they take it very seriously.
Yes, they do. I had a dream last night that I don't want anybody to interpret. I didn't understand it.
Are you going to share it here?
No, I'm not.
Okay, we'll go on. The butler's dream. The butler told Joseph his dream. There was a vine with 3 branches that produced grapes. I made juice from its grapes and gave a cup to the Pharaoh. Joseph interpreted the butler's dream, saying, "The 3 branches are days. In 3 days, the Pharaoh will release you from prison."
That's a good interpretation.
It is. That's happy, isn't it?
Yes, it is. When the baker heard Joseph's interpretation of the butler's dream, he decided to tell Joseph his too, saying, "I also had a dream. There were 3 white baskets on my head. The top basket had all kinds of meats for the Pharaoh, and birds ate out of it." Joseph interpreted the baker's dream, saying, "In 3 days the king will cut off your head, hang your body on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh." Okay. That sounds pretty awful.
That's really a nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. On the 3rd day after Joseph interpreted the butler and baker's dreams, the Pharaoh had a birthday party where he released the butler from prison and hanged the baker. He's 2 for 2 here,
Yeah.
Joseph, in interpreting dreams.
Yeah.
Poor baker.
Yeah, so the dream, his interpretation was, they came true.
Okay.
Chapter 41. 2 years later, the Pharaoh had a dream. Here's how it went. The Pharaoh was standing by the river when 7 fat, good-looking cows came to the river, followed by 7 skinny, ugly cows. The skinny cows ate the fat ones. Pharaoh had another dream. This time, 7 skinny heads of grain ate 7 fat ones. Pharaoh's magicians and wise men couldn't interpret his dreams. The butler told the Pharaoh about how Joseph had successfully interpreted his and the baker's dreams, so the Pharaoh called to Joseph and said to him, "I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. I've heard that you can interpret dreams."
Well, he's 2 for 2 right now, Joseph, in interpreting dreams.
Yeah.
Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream, saying, "God will send 7 good years followed by 7 years of famine, and the famine will be worldwide and very grievous." So I'm still trying to figure out skinny, fat, skinny eat the fat. How does that
Or
say?
the skinny years, you're going to eat the fat years. So you're going to have 7 fat years, good years.
Yeah.
And while the things aren't so good,
Yes.
the skinny years,
Yes.
you're going to eat the fat years. You're going to eat what was produced during the fat years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this is verse 40 and 41.
The Pharaoh said to Joseph, "God has shown you how to interpret my dreams. You will rule the land of Egypt." The Pharaoh took off his ring and put it on Joseph's hand, gave him some fancy clothes, put a gold ring around his neck. He gave him a chariot and commanded everyone in Egypt to obey him. He gave Joseph a new name, Zaphnathpaaneah, and a wife, Asenath. Joseph drove his new chariot all over the land of Egypt.
So the Pharaoh really liked the dream interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's happy.
Yep.
And he's really rewarding Joseph.
Yeah, and now we find out in verse 47 that it all happened just like he predicted. It sounds like he gave him all this reward before it even happened.
Yes. The proof was not in the pudding yet.
No, but it came later, and it all happened just like Joseph predicted. We had the 7 good years followed by the 7 bad years followed by the 7 good years.
Right here. Verse 48, during the 7 good years, Joseph gathered and stored all the food. Meanwhile, Joseph and his Egyptian wife, Asenath, had 2 sons. Manasseh, and Ephraim. As Joseph predicted, the 7 good years were followed by 7 bad ones. When the famine struck, everyone on earth had to buy their food from Joseph. If they couldn't travel that far or didn't have enough money, they starved. It was a 7-year earth-wide famine.
Yeah, and that's the end of that chapter.
That's the end of that chapter and that episode. Kind of, nothing too exciting, nothing where I'm going, oh my God.
No, and that's the way it goes toward the end of Genesis. It's all about Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just a little spoiler here, the next episode is going to be the last episode of Genesis. We're going to cover all the last, I think, 8 chapters or 7 chapters
really?
of Genesis.
That seems like a lot to cover.
Yeah, well, it's Joseph, and so,
we'll
you kind of already get the idea about Joseph.
Yes.
God's with him.
God's with him.
Good looking.
And he's kind of a show-off.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, that's it. Hey, thank you so much for listening.
Bye-bye.
See you next time.